All right, welcome back to another episode of the Fifth Wall Future World vodcast, where we bring you the latest advancement on climate tech and all things climate news related. Welcome back to the episode, Fran.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Of course, we got our usuals, Christian and Cedric here today too. We're gonna make it hot today.
The headline for today's episode is "Sun's out, guns out," or maybe buns out. Who knows?
Sun's out, nap time is the actual headline of today's article. So Cedric, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we are seeing record temperatures kind of everywhere around the globe, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, and how this is going to affect both kind of economic growth as well as kind of the environment and climate.
You know, I always kind of wondered this, and I think temperature is definitely something economists have attributed to this as well. But if you look at like GDPs and GDP per capita of the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere of the world, there's like quite the stark difference.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, you just said it, right? It's like heats up and nap time. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm far less productive when it's really hot out because I find it hard to focus.
Yeah, no, totally. When it's super, super hot out, you just kind of move slower because your body's like, hey, I need to keep the temperature down. So can't be effective.
Exactly. Your like natural body instinct is just kind of slow down to cool yourself down.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes logical sense, right? So let's look at it here too. So some places in the world, Vietnam and Thailand, have both experienced the hottest temperatures ever recorded just a few weeks ago. Spain broke records for temperatures in April. They saw the most land burned of any country in Europe in 2022. So obviously, as the temperatures rise, you've got higher risk of wildfires and just drier climates. India, it gets really hot in India. I've had some family members actually go visit India within the last couple years, and they had to go in the summer, and they just talked about how miserably hot it is. So, you know, is that country going to be ready for these extreme temperatures?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to like my experience of living in Hong Kong. It's like the hottest months are still to come in the region. It's like monsoon season, and so in August there'd be days where it's gearing up to be incredibly hot, and you can feel that there's about to be a storm, and you're like excited for the storm to come because of how hot and stuffy it gets.
Mm-hmm. And that's like humid heat too, right? It's not just dry heat. It's just you step
like
outside and
stifling.
you're just sweating.
Yeah, I saw.
Yes, exactly.
What is that like new body wash commercial where it shows the lady get on the train and she presses up against someone else's sweaty arm? And I was just like, oh, cringe, so bad.
Well, I did hear something that the more BO you have, or the less like fragrant your body wash is, the less susceptible you are to mosquito and bug bites. So there's some silver lining out there.
So that's why Cedric doesn't get many mosquito bites.
Yeah. So bottom line, just don't shower.
I mean, I feel like everyone just gets used to everyone being a little bit sweaty, and you just come to certain norms like, oh, we're just like not going to hug each other during these months because it's gross for everyone involved. And you just kind of get used to things like that.
Just fist bumps all around.
The tacos. Taco Tuesday every day. What are we seeing in some countries? Like, what are some countries doing to combat this heat and to be able to make it more comfortable for their citizens?
Yeah, mandated siestas.
Mandated siestas. Translation, mandated naps. Or who is mandating naps, or what are they actually doing around the temperatures there?
Yeah, no, so we're seeing this in Spain particularly, where schools, they're being allowed to kind of change their timetables to avoid the worst heats during the peak of the day. And then, public swimming pools are expected to open, months earlier and stay open for longer hours of the day. So I think there are kind of adapting and kind of strategies to mitigate the worst of the heat. But I think this kind of really kind of ties back to our heating and cooling thesis, and especially for the built world climate angle. It's like we're caught in a vicious, downward spiral which means more use of AC, which means more refrigerants, which means more heating, and so on and so forth. And so,
Fran, what else are you seeing out there? Anything else like in Hong Kong that Hong Kong is doing?
So, I mean, there's a variety of different things. One, we actually have in a lot of the center part of the town, there's walkways kind of throughout Hong Kong. And so you never really need to leave air conditioning if you're kind of walking in the center of town. And same with the subway system. You can pretty much walk a lot of way through center of town underground, so fully covered. But it does pump AC. Like everywhere you go, there's incredible amounts of AC. And so I can't imagine that's great in terms of the warming angle. And oftentimes you'll actually have stores with doors open even because they want to attract people in with the great AC that they're offering.
No, it's great. Yeah. I really like what some cities are doing. Maybe it was Singapore, I want to say, where they're actually trying to do more natural scapes throughout the city to reduce temperatures, right? Because the temperature is going to be hotter.
Like the urban heat
Yeah, urban
islands.
heat islands,
Yeah.
exactly. So they will do like the green walls that you see, right, where it's like plants up the sides of buildings, more grassy areas, more water features that essentially just help reduce the temperature within the cities. And so actually designing that in to say, hey, we know the temperature is rising. Look at the records we're setting. Here are some things we can do to maybe even shave off 3 to 5 degrees. And then there's also like just going underground. And I think we'll probably see more and more of that in the United States, right? We've already seen that in Las Vegas with the Boring Company, right? They're actually creating these tunnels essentially to be able to take Teslas through the tunnels as a mode of transport. So you don't have to walk out on like the super hot strip or for long periods of time to get, casino to casino or hotel to hotel, right? Because I mean, yeah, you don't want to be super sweaty when you're hitting the slots, I guess. But
Yeah, you don't want to sweat
and
out your
and
drunk.
Chicago also has that, but for cold. Like Chicago has that kind of full underground walk system as well, but it's obviously with it being colder, and Toronto does too, if I remember correctly.
yeah, and so quick question for you, both actually, little trivia time. Do more people die from cold weather or from hot weather each year?
So I think it depends exactly how you're defining when people die from the extreme heat or extreme cold events. I think if you're literally saying froze to death versus overheated to death, probably froze to death has more people. But there's so many other aspects of overheating the world that are also attributed to human health. So it's like what happens to animals during that period, and so if we have, and what happens to crops during that period if there's really extreme heat, especially given that so much of our food is grown in these places that there is this extreme heat.
But Christian, it sounds like you were going to say cold
Yeah, no,
is a bigger
we
driver.
need, we should
A cold
yeah,
take.
we should double click on some of the data here from the offset. Actually, they say that less people die from heat events than from cool events. Now, that's not to say that we like global warming doesn't exist. It's just to say that I think the climate is changing a lot on both ends. Like some areas are going like way colder, or even in the Bay Area this year, we had crazy, like how many atmospheric rivers hit us this year. I think it's less of an argument in my mind of hot versus cold and net benefit here versus net negative there, but just like general smoothing out and better use of resources.
Just staying in the Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
And I guess one other kind of point on this as well is that a lot of places that do experience extreme heat are probably places that have like lower GDP as a country. And so managing a lot of that like human hardship is probably more difficult for a lot of those countries. Not again, not necessarily saying that we shouldn't care about the extreme cold, but it certainly probably adds to the hardship and the impact, economic impact as well as human impact it has.
Do you think there's any silver linings or like potential opportunities to harness this higher heat, higher thermal energy somehow to, change that into, like renewables or some form of energy?
Yeah, I feel like extreme heat usually is associated with a lot more sunshine, but not necessarily. Hopefully, if it is, and of course, we can use more solar. I feel like heat pumps could also be quite effective in this regard, right? That they can help regulate the heating and cooling of buildings. And if there's more heat pumps, maybe that it will encourage people to actually install heat pumps and kind of reduce overall emissions, even if they increase the usage of their cooling systems.
To a certain extent, I feel like technology is probably not going to solve all of the problem, but I do think like there might be, the people who have a beach home in Florida, right, on the Gulf Coast and experience all these crazy hurricanes and flooding, you might not be able to have a beach home there anymore. Like you might have to move inland or move out of Florida. I do think we'll see some of these migrations as part of like climate resiliency.
With extreme heat, we're actually going to see a lot more bugs kind of enter the ecosystem. And like, I don't know what that does to kind of the growth and reproductive rate of bugs, but I imagine it increases it. So again, bringing all of this indoors probably has a like net positive impact, despite the fact it might increase food prices.
Yeah. Don't do drugs, eat bugs.
More
That's a
texture,
new
more
that's a new
protein.
slogan for primary schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dare to eat bugs.
Crickets are really yummy. I don't know if anyone else has eaten them in Mexico. Like eating crickets is great.
No, apparently like a lot of the world eats a lot of insects. There's a mental block there for me a little bit, but I wouldn't be opposed to trying. Like if someone said, "Hey, here's like a cricket-based protein bar," I'd try it.
Little chocolate covered crickets.
Yeah. It chirps when you eat it.
If no one told you what it was, is it that different than the like artificially created protein? I feel like that's grosser.
I mean, why not just do plant-based protein?
Everyone should just eat tofu,
There you go.
soybeans.
Tofu and soybeans.
Tofu and soybeans. I mean, we
Yeah,
eat other animals. Like an insect's just kind of like a different kind of animal, right? An animal with an exoskeleton.
we eat lobster, crab. They also
There you
have
go. Yeah.
those.
It's like a flying lobster.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I could go with cockroaches though. That may be my limit.
Yeah, I guess the feedstock. Feedstock is where I would have to. You don't want to eat a cow that like a hamburger that was fed with some weird stuff, right? Let's reel this in here. Or this article talks about damages, right? And what can we do to mitigate damages? And I think that I would agree with the article in the sense and in the thread of, hey, tech's not going to be able to do much to stop a hurricane, right? Yeah, I don't think there's really like a strong enough seawall or a big enough seawall that you could probably build that's going to like stop Hurricane Ian from destroying the coastline, right? But I would disagree with the academics here that technology will actually have a way, way bigger impact going forward, especially on the decarbonization side. And that's the distinction I want to make. They talk about like stopping damages, and then they talk about, well, we should try to decarbonize as kind of the long game to stop damages. And that's, I don't know what your take is on that, Cedric and Fran, but
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it all comes down to like the time value of carbon, right? Like if we can remove or avoid 1 ton of carbon today, it's worth more than removing 1 ton of carbon tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I agree as well. Like we need to just think about how do we reduce the amount of emissions we create whilst kind of doing relatively similar things, like not impacting most people's day-to-day lives, as well as mitigating that enough that it takes into account population growth as well. Because hopefully we can raise everyone's quality of life. That's what I was looking for. We can raise everyone's kind of quality of life whilst also keeping emissions as low as possible, and not necessarily kind of changing how we all operate on a day-to-day. And I think that's kind of the ultimate goal.
the humanity's ability to innovate, I think I'm going to bet on that every single time versus just kind of like the doom and gloom outcomes that many people kind of, portray or at least, share and, get clicks out there.
One thing to also mention when it comes to like thinking about us transitioning the grid too, it's also just a human element. There are a lot of jobs that we're talking about when we're saying like let's get rid of all the coal plants. I do think there's a kind of responsibility maybe on climate tech investors, maybe it's on government or a combination of the two to help reskill a lot of those people because we don't have enough people that have the skill set to like manage all the solar plants that we need to be able to build out. A lot of those old people who had been working at coal plants can absolutely be kind of rejiggered to start working at solar plants. I don't think they'd be upset by having kind of new job in a similar industry to what they were doing before. Or it's like the offshore oil rig people now doing offshore wind. That's a very similar skill set that they can definitely be kind of readjusted to help with this energy transition.
They're not old people, Fran. They're seasoned. They're a little
Seasons,
long
yeah.
in the tooth.
I don't know. Cedric was saying he was feeling pretty old after this weekend. So that's a great point to end on, Fran. I think we're on the same page here, right? There's so much good happening right now, so much innovation. We should all be excited. It's why we get up every morning. We show up to work, even though sometimes we don't want to, right? And so, on that note, a positive note for everyone, we will wrap up this episode. Fran, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have you in the stateside for a little bit. Easier to line up the time zones there. Cedric, good to see you today too in the office.